Ella had always believed in the quiet beauty of ordinary happiness. She wasn't someone who craved the spotlight or longed for lavish vacations in far-off places. For her, joy was found in the soft warmth of Sunday mornings with a book, in the way her husband kissed her forehead before work, in the sound of laughter echoing in their cozy home. At 31, life finally felt full. She was 6 months pregnant with their first child, a baby girl, and every flutter from within her growing belly filled her with a sense of awe she couldn't quite put into words. Jason, her husband of 4 years, was the kind of man others admired. Charming, composed, successful in his business ventures, he always knew what to say in a room. To outsiders, they were the perfect couple, an enviable mix of love, stability, and upward mobility. Ella used to think the same. He had been her rock, especially during the early months of pregnancy when the nausea was relentless and her emotions frayed easily. He would hold her hair, rub her back, whisper that she was beautiful even when she didn't feel it. But lately, there was a shift. Subtle things. He was on his phone more, took more business trips than usual, and often came home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers. Sometimes, he would stare right through her, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. She told herself it was nothing, just stress, just hormones. But deep down, something fragile had begun to crack. The distance between Ella and Jason grew slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, like a hairline fracture across glass, small, but dangerous if left unchecked. Jason began staying out later under the pretense of work meetings and investor dinners. He would return home with the scent of cologne mixed with something unfamiliar, faint traces of a woman's floral perfume that didn't belong to Ella. When she asked about it gently, half laughing to keep things light, he'd brush it off. "You're imagining things," he said with a smirk. "Pregnancy hormones will make you see ghosts if you let them." It wasn't just the perfume. His phone, once casually left on the kitchen counter, now never left his side. He changed his passcode, and if she glanced in his direction when a message came through, he would tilt the screen away like he had something to hide. Conversations felt rehearsed, mechanical, as if he were reading from a script he barely cared to follow. He no longer asked how she was feeling, didn't kiss her belly like he used to, and rolled his eyes when she mentioned baby names. One evening, unable to ignore the growing knot in her chest, she tried to talk to him. "Jason, I feel like you're not really here anymore. Are we okay?" He laughed coldly. "God, Ella. You're so dramatic lately. You've become paranoid. I can't say anything without you reading into it. Maybe focus more on being a mother and less on playing detective." That sentence stuck with her like a shard of ice. The dismissiveness, the subtle cruelty, it wasn't new. Not really. It had always been there, buried beneath his charm, but now it was blooming in full. Her instincts screamed that something was deeply wrong. But she couldn't yet see just how dangerous the truth would become. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day Ella once might have filled with baby prep and nesting. Jason had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter, a rare mistake, considering how guarded he'd become. At first, she only intended to check their shared calendar for his upcoming business trip, but a message popped up before she could look away. The screen lit with a chat window. The message was short, searing, "Miss you already, baby. Last night was perfect. When will she be gone for good?" The sender's name, Monica. A name she didn't recognize, but her gut clenched. Against the trembling in her fingers, she clicked into the thread. Dozens of messages spilled out, photos, intimate jokes, even a video she couldn't bring herself to play. There was no room for denial. The affair was real, and it was more than just physical. It was emotional, ongoing, and deliberate. That night, she confronted Jason with quiet devastation. He didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. "You've changed, Ella," he said coolly, folding his arms like a bored lecturer. "You're not the woman I married. You've let yourself go. Always tired, always emotional. Monica. She makes me feel alive again. She's everything you're not." Ella felt the world tilt beneath her. "I'm carrying your child," she whispered. He sneered. "Exactly. And it shows. You're used up. Monica deserves better than waiting around while I play house with a hormonal wreck. From that moment on, Monica stopped hiding. She showed up at Jason's office when Ella visited, smug and composed. She posted cryptic photos online with captions like, "Love doesn't lie," and "Real connection can't be faked." Then came the voicemails, taunting messages on their home phone, her voice syrupy sweet and dripping with malice. Ella's sanctuary, her home, was beginning to feel like a battleground. Monica seemed to delight in psychological warfare, leaving lipsticks behind, expensive perfumes sprayed in Ella's closet, even a silk scarf draped over the nursery rocker. Each act was a message: I'm here. He's mine. You're nothing. Jason allowed it. Worse, he encouraged it. Ella wasn't just being replaced, she was being erased, one cruel game at a time. It didn't take long for Jason to turn from distant to domineering. He began dropping documents on the kitchen table with vague explanations and artificial urgency. Just a few things for the business, he claimed, gesturing casually at the pages without making eye contact. Standard financial housekeeping. Legal stuff. Just sign. Ella scanned them the best she could, exhausted and overwhelmed, but something felt off. There were dense paragraphs about property rights, clauses she didn't understand buried beneath legal jargon. One form mentioned the house title. Another outlined adjustments to their joint account. When she asked questions, Jason became defensive. "You don't trust me now," he snapped. "You think I'd screw over the mother of my child?" But it wasn't about trust. It was instinct, raw and undeniable, that made her refuse. From that day forward, the atmosphere changed completely. Monica moved in under the guise of needing a place to stay temporarily, but Ella knew better. She claimed the guest bedroom, then slowly took over the living room, the kitchen, the TV remote. She laughed loudly with Jason late into the night, cooked meals without asking, and strutted around barefoot in lingerie, her presence a calculated offense. Every corner of Ella's home was contaminated by her existence. Friends stopped calling. Family thought she was exaggerating when she tried to explain. Jason painted her as irrational, unstable, hormonal. He was so convincing, so polished in public, that even Ella began to doubt her own perceptions. "She's just helping out," he'd tell others with a pitying smile. "Ella's not herself lately." The isolation was complete. Then, one night, when she passed by the guest room, she heard them talking, Jason's voice low and firm, Monica's higher, giddy with anticipation. "She's not going to sign," Monica said. "So what are we going to do?" There was silence, then Jason's cold reply. "We'll find another way. I want her gone." Gone. The word echoed in her mind. Not divorced. Not separated. Gone. Suddenly, everything snapped into focus. The documents. The gaslighting. The invasion. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a plan. A trap. And Ella, vulnerable and pregnant, was the one they were setting it for. It started with another one of Monica's carefully staged confrontations, timed for when Jason was home and emotionally checked out on the couch, scrolling through his phone. She came into the kitchen where Ella was preparing tea, her voice as sweet as syrup but laced with venom. "You left your prenatal vitamins in the bathroom again," she said, dropping the bottle on the counter a little too hard. "That's not very responsible for someone carrying a life, is it?" Ella tried to ignore her, reaching for the kettle. Her hands trembled slightly. She hadn't slept properly in weeks. The baby shifted inside her, a soft reminder of the life she had to protect. Monica stepped closer. "Maybe you're not cut out for this whole motherhood thing. Some women just aren't wired for it." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "You're falling apart, and it's only going to get worse. Why not make it easier for everyone and just leave?" "Get out of my way," Ella said, more tired than angry. That's when Monica snapped. In a flash, she grabbed a pair of sharp scissors from the knife block and pointed them at Ella, her expression morphing into something unrecognizable. Her eyes gleamed with unhinged glee as she waved the blade an inch from Ella's face. Do you think anyone would believe you if you said I did something? You're the unstable one, remember? You're hormonal. Fragile. You cry all the time. I'm just the concerned friend. Jason didn't move. He sat there in the next room, watching blankly, not even pretending to intervene. Ella's heart pounded. Her body screamed for her to run, but she couldn't, her stomach heavy with the weight of her child, her limbs slow with exhaustion. Monica's hand trembled slightly, but her grin never faded. She pressed the point of the scissors gently into Ella's arm, just enough to break the skin. A thin line of blood bloomed. You should really think about your options, Monica whispered, almost too softly to hear. It would be such a shame if something happened. A fall. An accident in the shower. A broken stair. No one would question it. Not if I cried hard enough. Ella stumbled backward, bumping into the kitchen island, her breath ragged. The sharp sting on her arm barely registered through the terror. Jason finally looked up. Not out of concern, but with mild interest. Monica, he said flatly, don't leave a mess. That broke something in Ella. Not just fear, but disbelief, disgust, fury. She grabbed the kettle and flung it toward Monica. It was lukewarm, not hot enough to burn, but it startled her. Monica screamed, dropping the scissors. Ella didn't wait. She shoved past her, ran to the bedroom, and locked the door behind her, heart hammering so hard she thought she might pass out. Inside, she sobbed silently, cradling her stomach. She wasn't just afraid anymore, she was done pretending this was salvageable. The man she married wasn't going to protect her. He had become a willing participant in her psychological torture, and Monica, no longer just a mistress, was a danger to her life and her child's. She curled up in bed, blood still dripping lightly from the cut on her arm, feeling utterly shattered. Every thread of her former life had been pulled apart. She was alone, cornered. And she knew, with certainty now, that they didn't just want her to leave. They wanted her erased. She had no plan, no money, no one to call. But somewhere in the quiet of that night, something inside her began to shift. She would not let them destroy her. Not entirely. Not without a fight. The night Ella ran, the rain came down in sheets, soaking her within minutes. She didn't even have time to pack, just grabbed her purse, her coat, and fled the house when Jason and Monica were arguing in the living room. Her heart pounded the entire time, her body heavy, aching, and unsteady. The baby kicked nervously inside her, responding to her adrenaline. She had no plan, no destination, only the burning instinct to get away before they made good on their threat. She walked for nearly an hour, the city lights blurring behind her in the storm. Her shoes squelched with every step, her limbs numb. She had passed several buildings before finally collapsing at the gates of a private estate, a sprawling property with tall wrought iron fencing and glowing lights that felt more like a dream than reality. She clung to the gate, breath shallow, soaked through and trembling. Her vision blurred. She didn't have the strength to call for help. That's when the front door opened, and a tall man in a black coat stepped out onto the marble steps. He paused when he saw her, this drenched, desperate figure clinging to his gate like a ghost. Without hesitation, he strode toward her, ignoring the rain. His voice was deep, calm, authoritative. "Are you hurt?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She tried to speak but only managed a whisper. I'm pregnant." He didn't waste time. He lifted her gently into his arms as if she weighed nothing. "You're safe now," he said, more to himself than to her. She passed out before she could ask his name. When she woke hours later in a guest room lined with soft blankets and the faint scent of cedarwood, she learned who he was: Alexander Wolf, billionaire tech magnate, investor, and notoriously private recluse. But in that moment, he wasn't a public figure. He was her unexpected lifeline. He sat at her bedside, calm but watchful. "You don't have to tell me anything yet," he said gently. "But whatever you're running from, you're not going back. Not while you're under my roof." The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through the windows, a stark contrast to the chaos Ella had escaped. She woke slowly, her body sore, her mind fogged with fear. A nurse sat quietly nearby, checking her vitals, offering a warm smile. "Mr. Wolf brought me in. He said you'd need care, especially in your condition." Ella blinked. Everything felt surreal, like she'd stepped into someone else's life. She was wearing clean clothes, lying in a bed softer than anything she'd ever slept in. For the first time in weeks, no one was yelling, manipulating, or threatening her. But the fear hadn't left. It clung to her like a second skin. Alexander entered the room a few minutes later, dressed in a tailored suit but without the arrogance she expected from someone so powerful. His expression was careful, composed, but there was a storm behind his eyes. "You're safe here," he said, pulling up a chair. "But I need to know what happened to you. No pressure. Only if you're ready." Ella hesitated. Trust had become a foreign concept. But something in his tone, genuine, steady, and without agenda, gave her the strength to speak. Her voice cracked as she began, but once the words started, they didn't stop. She told him everything: Jason's betrayal, Monica's cruelty, the isolation, the documents, the scissors. By the end, her hands were shaking. Alexander didn't interrupt once. But when she finished, his jaw was clenched, and his knuckles were white from gripping the arm of his chair. "They threatened a pregnant woman in her own home," he said coldly. "They deserve to burn for that." Without asking permission, he stood and made a call. Within the hour, a private investigator was in his study, reviewing photos of Jason and Monica, digging through public and financial records. Alexander worked with a quiet, lethal efficiency. This wasn't just pity, this was war. "I have people in media, law, and finance," he told her later. "If they so much as breathe in your direction again, I'll make sure they never recover." "You're not alone anymore, Ella." For the first time in a long time, she believed it. The nightmare wasn't over, but the tide had finally begun to turn. Alexander's investigator moved fast, leaving no corner of Jason's world untouched. Within days, the truth began to surface, and it was uglier than Ella had even imagined. Beneath the polished exterior of Jason's business empire lay a web of fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. Funds were being funneled through shell companies, clients were misled, and investor money had mysteriously vanished. It wasn't just immoral, it was illegal. Even worse, the investigator unearthed evidence of Jason's psychological abuse. Text messages, recordings, photos of the bruises Ella hadn't even realized Monica had left on her during tense, accidental shoves. There were also documents, unsigned but damning, that showed his attempt to strip Ella of her financial rights. Every thread told the same story. Jason wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a manipulator, a predator. And Monica, she was no innocent bystander. Her past included multiple aliases, a history of restraining orders from other partners' ex-wives, and charges that had mysteriously disappeared, likely buried with hush money. But Alexander had reach. Once her connection to Jason's financial dealings became clear, Monica became a liability, and when she realized the walls were closing in, she tried to run. She didn't make it far. Authorities intercepted her at the airport with a suitcase full of cash and forged identification. She screamed, cried, begged, but the cameras were already flashing, and the headlines were already being written. Jason's fall was even more spectacular. It started with a leak, an anonymous tip to a financial news outlet that included damning evidence of fraud. The story exploded. Suddenly, investors pulled out, sponsors dropped him, and his face vanished from glossy business magazines. Journalists dug deeper and found Ella's story. Her name, once hidden behind pity and rumors, became a rallying cry. The public turned on Jason with a fury. Once celebrated for his success, he was now reviled for his cruelty. Advocacy groups rallied around Ella, lifting her up as a survivor rather than a victim. She didn't even have to say much. The evidence spoke for itself. Jason was arrested on multiple charges, including financial fraud and attempted coercion. And as the cameras followed his walk of shame into the courtroom, the world finally saw him for what he truly was. Ella didn't watch the news that day. She was in a quiet garden, hand resting on her belly, finally breathing free air. Months later, in the soft glow of a spring morning, Ella held her daughter for the first time. The tiny girl's fingers curled around hers, her eyes blinking slowly as if greeting a world full of possibilities. Alexander was by her side throughout the delivery, calm and steady, a silent guardian through every contraction and every breath. The hospital room felt warm, a sanctuary far removed from the darkness that had haunted Ella's recent past. In those quiet moments, something inside her shifted. The fear that had gripped her heart loosened its hold, replaced by a fierce and blossoming strength. She was a mother now, a survivor, and someone who had reclaimed her life from the ashes. With Alexander's unwavering support, Ella began to build something new, not just for herself, but for others like her. She founded a charity dedicated to helping women trapped in abusive relationships, providing safe spaces, counseling, and legal aid. Each success story, each woman saved, felt like a step further away from her nightmare and closer to the future she dreamed of. Their relationship remained careful, tender, rooted in mutual respect rather than rushed passion. Alexander never pushed, never demanded more than she was ready to give. And slowly, with time, Ella found herself smiling more, laughing softly, and allowing herself to hope again. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, Ella sat on the veranda of Alexander's estate, cradling her daughter while Alexander poured tea beside her. The air was calm, filled with the scent of blooming jasmine and the promise of new beginnings. Ella looked up at him, her eyes clear and steady. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled gently. "This is just the beginning." And for the first time in a long time, Ella believed it. Ella's journey was a testament to the unbreakable spirit of a woman who refused to be silenced. From the shadows of betrayal and fear, she emerged stronger, no longer a victim, but a survivor and an advocate for those still trapped in darkness. Her story reminds us that even in the bleakest moments, courage can light the way, and justice can prevail. With every step she took, Ella reclaimed not just her life, but her power, and in doing so, she inspired countless others to stand up, speak out, and believe in the possibility of a brighter tomorrow.